Hey guys, it's Misty with My Paper Cuts, and today for day 11 of my different kind of December daily, sitting here in the craft room, I'm actually going to be making some flowers. I need some more Christmas flowers made, and I've been requested several times to share my process for making flowers, so I'm going to go over some of the basics. There's so much to remember. I made myself a list. Hopefully I don't miss anything. But I just know that quite a few people have asked me to share this information or to go over some of the basics of it. So I decided, since that's what I'll be doing this weekend, is making quite a few of them on top of other things, that I would go ahead and try to share as much as I can for my flower making process. There's a ton of videos out there on how to make flowers. There's lots of difference of opinion. There's lots of different ways to approach it. I'll probably be going over a lot of stuff you already know or you've already heard. In no way am I claiming any of these ideas to be original. I'm just sharing my process and the tools I use and the things that I look for and do. So without any further ado, I will go ahead and share. So I put this box in front of you guys just to show you some examples of flowers that I've made. One of my favorite things to do when I'm making a project like this is to create flowers out of the pattern papers in the collection. You can use small pieces of the pattern paper to make flowers, so that's the reason why I like to do that. Plus, they match perfectly. It's a great way to use up scraps of pattern paper. Some patterns are obviously better than others, but we'll go over that in a different video. For this video, like I said, I just want to give you guys again some examples of the flowers that I make. And this video I will be going over the basic tools and things that I use to make my flowers. And then I'll be back with a video on the different types of papers that I will use. And then I will do a coloring video of all the different ways that I will color my flowers. And then I will do something with the, with the ending, with the decorating and such. So hopefully that's okay with you guys. It's so much material. I don't want to bore you with, an hour and a half long video. But if you want to see the tools, you can just watch this video. If you just want to see the papers, blah, blah, blah. So I will go ahead and get started. So the very first thing that I will go over is the dies and even some stamps that I will use to make flowers. So obviously, one of the big companies for making flowers is Heartfelt Creations, and I do use their molds a lot. I have 3 that I use, but these stamps and matching dies that you can get from Heartfelt, they're pretty spendy, and they do make beautiful flowers, and they are custom fit to the molds so that you will get, your carnation will look like a carnation, your rose will look like a rose. But by the time you invest in each one, it better be a flower that you're making all the time, because it is expensive. The dies were 30, the stamps were 20, the mold I believe is another 20 to 30 for the matching molds. So what I've done is I have my favorite flowers that I use from them. This was the very first one that I ever bought from them. It's a very, very simple one. But I do get a lot of use out of this because it is an odd petal, but it is a very basic flower. And this one is, I got this before I even got a mold. So they do have great, great flowers. So if you find yourself making roses all the time, then the rose set is great for you. Because you will get very realistic looking roses. But you can also make beautiful flowers by mixing and matching your existing dies or less expensive floral dies and stamps with the Heartfelt Creations molds. I do believe the molds are a great investment for anyone because you can mold all of your flowers with them. So Heartfelt has great selection. And another one that I've been buying a lot lately is the Crafter's Companion. So they just recently had a special on these. Now they do foam, which I'm going to do foam flowers in a completely different video because it's completely different than making them with papers. So I will share that process, but you can still use the dies with your paper and just make paper flowers. So just keep that in mind. The one thing that I do want to point out, and I have a couple of other ones to share here, is, if you buy these gigantic ones, you might have trouble finding a mold to fit them. But you can use an embossing folder. Like I know Susan has gone over that in a video when she first started using the molds. She realized some of the textures could be repeated with embossing folders, and I'll go over that in a second too. But if you have really large ones, you might have to look at using embossing folders for the texture, but the assembly would still be the same. So keep that in mind. And also another thing I like to point out, because this one here is one of my very, very favorite poinsettia dies, and that's, I just love the shape and the size that these come out. They're nice and compact and small. The ones that I shared recently were made with this die. However, I do need to point out, if you guys can see, let me bring it up real close to try to get rid of that glare. The center is very delicate. And part of the process of using the molds is you are misting the paper with water. So you have to bear in mind that this is likely to tear, and these petals are likely to fall off. So until you get used to the process, I wouldn't suggest using a die like this, but it is possible. You just have to be really careful. And I do have a workaround that I will share once I start making some of these, because this is one of the things I'll be making. It does help with this, and of course you can always glue the petals back in when you're doing the assembly, but it can make it really finicky and frustrating if you're trying to use a die with a very delicate center like this. You do want something that's a little sturdier, which if you look at this one, it has a much sturdier center. So, and then you would have to still be lighter with the water. So those are what I mean when you can get other brands of dies that you can use with these molds. The other thing that I want to go over with dies is don't forget leaves. You know, part of making a realistic flower is adding a nice leaf to it. So these again are Crafter's Companion. They did come in the set that I got, but they were handy and easy to show an example. It's another type of thing that you can add, you know, extra layers to your flowers to make them much more realistic. And then the last thing I wanted to go over is don't forget your stamps. Now I know a lot of you don't mind fussy cutting. And so you can always, you know, fussy cut out your flowers, give them a little texture in the molds or an embossing folder, and pop up a layer so that you have a textured flower coming out from a floral background like this. And on a flower like this, you've also got the leaves that you could cut out and you could use on other flowers. So don't forget your stamps. Like this is a great leaf to use behind flowers. And see, and here it is separately just for this particular stamp. But, you know, I mean, keep an eye out for stuff like that, or for foliage type dies that you can use. And of course, another option is if you have an electronic die cutting machine, you can always cut out flowers with that. You just need basic flower shapes. And depending on the paper and the extra texture and things that you add, you can make a beautiful flower out of just a very simple floral shape. So then the next thing, of course, is the molds. And I have 3. I have this one, which is a great one that's just general use because it's just got circular openings. This is their mold that is intended for all flowers. You've got from the smallest all the way up to these large ones. It is fairly deep. I do find this adds a lot of veining into my petals, but it doesn't like give that crimping effect that the next one I show will do. But this one I love to put my leaves in, and I love to put my stamped ones in because I don't necessarily need them to be 3D, but I do want to add the texture and then pop it up with some foam dots or something. So this is a really handy mold to have. And I'll show you, you can see how deep the wells are there, but you can see the texture that will add to anything that you press through this mold. So this is a good one to have on hand if you don't want to invest in one that might limit the size of flowers that you do, and you're just looking for some texture and some dimension, and you're not necessarily looking to just make the really 3D crimped petals. So there is that mold. This one here is the rose mold, which is the one that everybody was talking about last year. And this one has a lot of openings. This one adds fantastic crimping and dimension. You can see how deep the wells are. And I use this one all the time. You can see by the top here just how far that will press in. So this is a really good mold if you really want some of those realistic petals without having to do much more shaping when you're done. So this is the one that I would highly recommend if you're really looking to make like those prima looking flowers, those ones with lots of dimension and depth, and they're 3D for, you know, it's just money saving. I guess I'm going to get tongue tied, guys. Sorry. But I mean, this is my favorite mold of the three. But that's just because it makes it so easy because it does all the dimension for you. And then this last one, I have to give a shout out to Dina. Thank you, Dina. She sent me this one for my birthday, and this is maybe it was Christmas. So she sent me this in one of her many happy mails that she has sent me over the past couple of years. And this is the poinsettia one. And I do like this one because it's great for the small ones. And again, this is another one that does add pretty good depth and texture. But again, you're limited on the size. So this is really good for your mini flowers. And that's what I wanted this one so badly for, is it's really good to add texture to the mini flowers. And you can put so many in here in one pass that you can get a lot of flowers done at once. So those are the 3 Heartfelt Creations molds that I use all the time. And then I just have a couple of examples here of, this is one of my favorite embossing folders. It's really old. I don't think they make it anymore. But this has, I think, wood grain texture is a great way to add kind of that same veining look that a lot of these molds have and a lot of petals have on them, and leaves especially. Wood grain texture is a great texture to use when you're trying to make molds. This is this embossing folder you can use both ways, and it also has a brick texture. But that's another one that would add some interesting texture to the paper that you're using for your molds. But this wood grain is fantastic. There's also the 3D wood grains that you can get, like this Tim Holtz here, that it adds even more depth and dimension because it is 3D. It adds much more of a realistic. But to me, a wood grain texture, if you can't get one of these molds, a wood grain texture is a good substitute, especially for leaves. So there's that. And then another one that I know that Susan has that she loves is this kind of crackled one. And this just adds kind of an interesting texture as well. Now, it's not a very realistic, like a flower one, but it is a really cool texture, and it does look cool when you make flowers and you use this as your texture element. So those are just some examples of embossing folders that I would use while making flowers. So my next tool that to me is a lifesaver on the hands, but this can also be used if you don't have the molds for shaping your flowers, and I use it both with embossing folders and these ball tools. So this is a set from Crafter's Companion, and I did get this in one of the big flower kits that I ordered, but it's got all the different sizes. So this is really good for shaping to give your 3D effect. You can press down. This is also really good for shaping just regular flowers. If you're not using the molds and you're just using the embossing folders, you would just press down and roll your paper, and it will just magically bring it up and make it more 3-dimensional. And when you do that, the easiest way to do it is to have a nice soft surface. So this is a piece of foam, and again, you're pressing your paper into it, just like this. Let me see if I have a scrap nearby. So you could press, and you would press down. And of course, if your paper is damp, it works, but you can even see just doing that little bit there, it adds, this is kind of thick cardstock, so it's not a good example, but if you just roll it, it will just bring up and press down into the center your shape, and it's easier on your hands. And you can also just put it in the palm of your hand and push down, and the heat of your hand, especially if the paper is damp, that will help it go even faster for you. So I do recommend those. They're not a necessity, but they are much easier. And for foam, you can always take a mouse pad and flip it upside down and use the soft back for this, or you can use, like, I know this was kind of big, but they have these big stamping pads that I don't even know if they sell this anymore. P's probably laughing at me because this is so old, but this is a super thick, very firm foam. And when you're stamping anything, it's good to have kind of a forgiving surface underneath. I've even put just even a towel underneath if I didn't have anything right there handy. Just when you stamp, you'll get a cleaner image. But this, or a mouse pad, or this nice soft stamping surface, or even just a piece of, sometimes there's wrapping foam inside of our packages, but anything that will give you even more give when you're pressing down to make the flowers will make your job easier. And then the last thing that is really easy, or makes things much easier, especially if you're going to be using stamens, which I will go over, is you want to be able to put a hole in the center of your flower if you're going to be adding any stamens. So I have a couple of ways of doing that. So this is a pokey tool from Crafter's Companion, and this bugger is very fine point and very sharp. And it does have 2 rubber ends on it. I already managed to lose one, but I have several of these because I just like the feel of this in my hand. So it's real easy, especially if you have a foam surface, just to stab and pick up your things. And I know that Sarah on Crafter's Companion demonstrates that a lot with the foam flowers. But pokey tools are handy just to have in general. I use these for placing items, for cleaning, if glue seeps out, to clean along the edge to get the extra glue out when I glue something down. So these little pokey tools are nice. This one is easier to hold in your hand, and this is the Tonic Tim Holtz one. This is old. They're now, I think they're black. But this one's retractable, which is good if you've got little ones around. But it's the exact same thing. It's just a pokey tool. And so I suggest having those. And if you don't have those, and that's hard on your hands, another option is there are hole punches that have very fine points on them. So if it's a small enough flower that you can reach it in there and reach the center with this is another option for putting that hole in the center of your flowers for when you want to do stamens. But having that hole pre-made when you're trying to do it will help, especially if you're using hot glue. You want to try to make the hole, pre-make the holes, and then before the glue dries, put your pokey tool through them again so that it reopens the hole. But we'll go over that during the assembly. But so those are the basic tools that I use. I will be back to go over some of the papers that I use, and then as I make them, I will come back and share the different finishing touches and things that I will do. So I hope this helps you guys out. Sorry I rambled on again for so long, but I just want to make sure I cover everything and answer some questions you may have. So if I missed anything, please let me know. Leave me a comment, send me a text if you got my number, however you want to do it. My email is in the About Me section. If there's anything I can help with, just let me know, and I'll be back soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.